Murray Olds, Australia correspondent with us now. Hi, Muzz.
Heather, very good afternoon.
Geez, man, these guys and the officials in New South Wales must be getting really frustrated.
Well, they are. Delta's changed all the ground rules. I mean, this isn't what we had a year ago, right? This is not what we had a year ago. Here's a couple of quick stats for you. On Monday this week, Lifeline over here has been going since 1963. 1963, they had their biggest single ever day of calls on Monday, 3,000 calls to the suicide prevention line. It's going off the graph. I heard those stats you mentioned. 16 new cases in Queensland, 8 in Victoria. You've got 2 mysteries there. And sadly, and very distressingly, it's into the schools in both Brisbane and in Melbourne. New South Wales, 262 new cases, the worst day yet. This is Delta. Tuesday afternoon, a 27-year-old man, fit and well, healthy, a forklift driver, only married 3 months. His wife's found him dead at their home in southwest Sydney. This has completely changed the dynamic. That's why guys like Brad Hazzard, our health minister, are getting so cranky. For goodness sake, roll up your sleeve and get vaccinated. It's the only way out of here is the message. But a lot of people, Heather, still aren't listening.
Now, Muzz, at the outset, I thought, okay, that the reason for that was because all the deaths, and there were very few deaths at the very start, weren't people in the 80s and 90s, maybe
Correct.
in the 70s,
Yep.
right? But now you got young people in the 20s dying. Why is it not changing the calculation for people?
Look, it is a little bit. I think maybe Hazzard was acting for the cameras this morning because your vaccination rates are really spiking up here in New South Wales. Yeah. The thing is, for this young 27-year-old man, I mean, tragically, he wasn't able to get vaccinated. No one thought he was going to die. It was going to be his grandparents, for goodness sake. But Delta has changed that. That's why there's a lot of young people who are getting vaccinated. You're going to get 180-odd thousand, I think, extra doses of Pfizer are going to be shoved into New South Wales by the government. And here's another big thing. I've just looked at my notes down here. This Delta variant is now seeped out. It's now up north of Sydney and Newcastle, and also up the Hunter Valley because they've got fragments coming up in sewage. Also way up in northern New South Wales and Armidale. So this thing's on the move, and the only defence we've got until we get a whole lot more jabs and arms is to just get out there and get vaccinated. It's very scary.
Muzz, this $1 billion that's been announced for Indigenous communities by the federal government, what's that for?
Well, it is closing the gap. Now, you know, Indigenous disadvantage in this country is as plain as the nose on your face. Poorly educated, poor health outcomes, average life expectancy dramatically lower than white Australians. Everywhere you look, incarceration rates, it's terrible. It really is an indictment on this modern 21st century Australia that you've got these dreadful statistics. So every year the federal government in charge, doesn't matter Labor or Liberal, the Prime Minister addresses the gap. How can we fix this? Well, over the next 10 years, $1 billion, Heather, to be put into this. Immediately, $380 million to help the victims of the stolen generations. These were the young Indigenous boys and girls who were taken from mum and dad because white people thought it would be much better for them to go and live with white families and go to white schools. It may have been well-intentioned, but it didn't work in so many, many cases. And if you look at 17 targeted outcomes, you know, let's get really serious about 17 outcomes to improve the lot of Indigenous Australians, only 3. They're pretty important in the last 12 months have improved. Birth weights for Indigenous kiddies, early education attendance, that's up as well. And here's an important one, reducing Indigenous teens in the youth justice system.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 tiny increments. 3 is better than none, but that means there are still 14 out there that are languishing. So $1 billion over 10 years. And you wouldn't find a fair dinkum Australian who would say, gee, that's a waste of money. It's a national shame. It's just a tragedy.
Okay, Muzz, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Murray Olds, our Australia correspondent.
Nothing but sport. Join Darcy Waldegrave on the biggest hour of sport. It's Sports Talk, 7 to 8 p.m. Tuesday to Friday. Opinion and interviews. All the sport you can handle. Listen and follow on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. News Talk ZB.
It's all about the 80s. The 80s,
The best music era
ever.
Coast 80s.
Listen and follow now on iHeartRadio.